Hello, guys. How are you doing today? Glad to have you with me. This show is going to be about a topic that we're going to get straight into it. It's going to be about Russia and what's going on with Russia and with the forces that they're allying themselves with. Now, here's the thing. Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, they're allying themselves together, these countries, and they're trying to undermine the petrodollar, and they're working hard at it, and they're also accumulating gold, and maybe even bitcoins. Russia, it might be even starting to buy bitcoins. There's been word out there that that's perhaps the case, or getting ready to start buying bitcoins and gold. They're buying gold, they're buying silver, they're preparing for something really big. Now, let's not get it wrong. Let's not get it wrong here. The American, I'll call it empire, why I call it empire is because they've controlled the whole world by the use of the petrodollar for many years now. The American empire has the greatest weaponry and the greatest forces, the most powerful forces on earth. And one of the reasons why is they've invested in technology going all the way back into the 1940s. And they've built these places called areas, top secret areas. Now, one of the most famous of the areas is Area 51, also known as the Groom Lake facility. Top secret, these areas. But you know, if there's Area 51, you know there's area like Area 30 and Area 31 and Area 32 and Area 33 and 34. They have these deep underground military bases that go down underneath the ground you could go down an elevator into these deep underground military bases, and under there they've got scientists working on top secret weaponry projects that are 50 years advanced from what they tell us about some of these weapons. They've got weapons that can, one weapon's called, I think they call it the Rod of God or something like that. It shoots some sort of a projectile at the ground at extremely high velocities, and it can almost simulate a nuclear explosion, but it's not nuclear. They've got space-based weapon systems and everything. It's amazing the weaponry that America has. But here's the thing. At the same time, Russia is developing weapons, tremendous weapons as well. So let's take a look at what's going on. Let's get the charts going on, and I'll show you some things that's going on. Russia is ready to deploy hypersonic weapons that the United States can't defend against. And I'm going to tell you the reason why Russia's putting these weapon systems in. Russia realizes that America has the upper hand on space-based weapons and stuff like that, right? And with the old rocket-based weapons where you have a missile that comes halfway around, what's called an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, and that's what Russia used to have. They had lots of them. They built lots of them during the Cold War. They carry a thermonuclear warhead over. They're worried that America could actually get the capability to knock those down before they ever get to America. You know? Here's the thing. How would they defend themselves? All they need is just a handful of these hypersonic weapons that the United States cannot defend themselves against, to act as a deterrent to the American weapons. Okay, so we've established that so far, that Russia right now is working very hard to establish a deterrent to the American super weapons. So if both sides get deterrents against each other, it's the same thing as what they used to have during the Cold War that was called Mutual Assured Destruction, or MAD. And that kept peace for many years. MAD did, because both sides would have killed each other if they had tried anything. Basically, that's how it works. But what's happened is America's technological advancement was getting to the point where it's exceeding the MAD, you know? So now Russia's stepped it up a notch, and they're developing a deterrent against that. So now picture both sides. You got one side, they got the deterrent, and the other side's got a deterrent, so they've reestablished a point where neither side's going to attack one another because they would destroy each other, and they both realize this. So how can they actually go to war together with each other when they both have weapons that can exterminate one another? Well, actually, it's something that's very simple. It's called conventional warfare. You go back to tanks and guns and back to the simple weapons, as weapons that were used during World War II, during the battles in World War II. Conventional weapons. Now, if one side starts a conventional warfare and starts to use conventional weapons, well, let's face it, right now, over in Syria, they're using conventional weapons. They're not using nuclear weapons, and they have the nuclear capability. The United States is moving out of Syria right now. But all along, the United States had the capability to use nuclear weapons in Syria, and so did Russia. Russia's been in Syria, too. But they're keeping it conventional. Well, we got huge problems here. I'm going to get to the problems. World War III. Iran and Russia are joining forces right now for joint war games in the Caspian Sea. Okay? They are working together to hold joint naval exercises in the Caspian Sea for what's called peace and stability. Well, to me, that's all a bunch of rubbish. Baloney. They're preparing for something much bigger, a much bigger operation. And that's why they're working together. Now, the Russians last year held a military exercise. It was a mock military exercise, a drill, to train their soldiers. And what the drill was all about, it was called Zapad 2018. And what they did was they went in there, and they had thousands and thousands of troops in this, the Russians did, and they trained in a mock exercise to war against NATO. That's what they're doing. They're training to fight against NATO. Okay? So keep that in mind as we move on here. Now, let's take a look at the build-up here. Moldova. Now, Moldova is a small country right next to Ukraine. It's very close to Ukraine. And it's close to where the Russians annexed Crimea, which is part of Ukraine. Now, Moldova is concerned over Russian troop movements in the breakaway region. Right here, see? Now, here's the thing. We got Russian troops, and they're in and near Moldova. What else? Poroshenko is worried because there's 80,000 Russian troops in and around Ukraine. Okay? They're stationed there. Okay? Now, let's take a look. There's more. Yelchenko says the number of Russian troops in Crimea is now greater than in Soviet times. So they've brought a whole bunch of troops into Crimea, too. The area that they annexed, straight bordering Ukraine, too. So what we see here is a huge Russian military buildup. This is all leading to something, and I believe I know what all of it's leading to. I believe I know what the Russian trying to deploy hypersonic weapons is leading to. This is a deterrent to keep the Americans conventional. In other words, if a war starts out in Eastern Europe between Russia and NATO, the war that they've practiced for already, if it breaks out, then these hypersonic weapons are going to be the Russia's way of making a deterrent against the space-age weapons that America's been developing since the 1940s. So, in other words, what they're basically saying to America is, we've got weapons that you can't stop, and we know you have weapons that we can't stop, so if you keep it conventional, we will keep it conventional. This is basically what they're saying, okay? They want to keep it conventional. This is basically when they go into the war, they want to keep it conventional. But here's the thing. Russia's stationing all of these troops in around Crimea in around Moldova, in around Ukraine, on the border of Ukraine, and they've got to feed all these troops, they've got to train all these troops, and we're talking hundreds of thousands of troops. Okay? And they've been keeping them there for quite a while now. You have to ask yourself, what is Russia keeping those troops there for? And what are they waiting for? And I think I know the answers to all of this. And I'll tell you what I think the answer is. I think the answer is got everything to do with what we see happening right in front of our eyes. We've got the yellow vest movement going on. We've got the banking system in Italy in tatters. We've got the Brexit facing us, staring us right ahead, right? And the people in England and in the United Kingdom, they are divided on this issue 50-50. I mean, this could cause a civil, could I say civil war? All of this disruption in the West, including the financial system of the entire West, the stock markets are ready to roll over. All of this together, right, could create a situation where it could inhibit our ability or NATO's ability to actually fight. In fact, it could get so bad that we have trouble getting our troops home. Quite seriously. Armies run on their stomach. They need food, they need money, they need munitions, they need supplies, it all costs money. And if you got a financial system that's completely torn itself to pieces and there's nothing left, right? What better opportunity is there for Russia to attack? Why should Russia attack right now? They're waiting. They know that the collapse of the Western financial system is imminent. And I believe that they're waiting. They're being very patient. They're waiting until the collapse is at its worst moment, until we're all over here and we're in chaos and our streets are full of yellow jackets, yellow vests, and there's buildings on fire and everything else, and communication lines are being cut by God knows who, you know, and I mean, the power grid's going down because there's not enough, just our whole economy's broken down into, we got no lights on even, for crying out loud, and we're all huddled in our homes trying to eat our beans, and you know what I mean? And the lights go out and everything else, and then Russia waits for that opportune moment when we are at our most vulnerable. Now, who got us here? The globalists and their agenda, their New World Order agenda. That's what's made us vulnerable to Russian attack. Now we're in a situation where they've caused forced debt creation, the globalists have, and they've done it on purpose so they can bring the system down and establish their New World Order. Okay? They've used what's called forced debt creation. Basically, it amounts to extending credit out, voluminous amounts of credit for everybody. Credit cards, hand them out to the little kids, you know, like they're playing cards. Here's a credit card for you, Jimmy. Go out and have some fun this Christmas. And then all of a sudden, boom, when everybody's saturated with debt, what do? Then they start to pop the bubble, the globalists do. They start to raise interest rates. They start to cut quantitative easing and then go the other way with quantitative tightening, right? So that they can bring the system down so that then they can establish their new system, their New World Order, okay? But during that period in time when they wanted to phase their New World, and none of it's working for them anyway, there's one big giant fly in their ointment. One big thing that came along that they didn't expect that just kind of spoiled all the plans that they've been working these plans for years, slowly getting the system where they wanted it, ready for this global takedown and this and to make everything the way they wanted it to be. And all of a sudden, one man comes walking in.
you know, and he has messed everything up for them. But now they've set these plans in motion for so many years that even that one man that stepped in that's messing everything up for them probably can't stop what's going to happen. So whose fault is it? It's the globalists' fault for getting us in this situation. We could have remained strong to oppose the threat of the Russians. But now the Russians are waiting for us to expose our backside, almost like a predatory animal, you know, like if you were in a pack of wolves or something, and a pack of wolves surrounded you. They're looking for you to expose your flank or your backside. You turn around and they're on you. You got to keep your eye right on them, you know. And that's the way with the Russians. The Russians are like a bear or a wolf. And as long as America stays focused and keeps her wits about her and keeps her weapons intact and keeps their guns well oiled, then Russia stays at bay. But what happens if all of a sudden we expose our flanks by going into a financial crisis? Well, the Russians, they're preparing. They're preparing to try to keep America conventional. They want to keep America conventional, and the best way to do it is to deploy hypersonic weapons that America cannot defend against. That way they can keep America at bay when they come in with conventional forces, when we are at our weakest moment. And do you know what the first thing the Russians are going to do? They're going to cut our lines of communication when we're at our weakest moment. We're going to be sitting in the dark, and our computers aren't going to work, and we ain't going to be able to do nothing. But you can bet the Russians and the Chinese will have internet, and they'll be communicating back and forth because they're buddies. Donald Trump's right with his tariff war. In fact, it should have been 10 times worse. And we're winning that war, by the way. But it's maybe a little bit not enough and a little bit too late, to tell you the truth, because of what the globalists have done to us. And they wanted to get their globalist patsy in there for president. Didn't work for them, did it? And they were all crying, boo, oh, she lost, oh, she lost, and having their little tissy fits, you know? But it's for the best, because you know what? I'm going to tell you, 2 years ago all of this might have happened already, if it hadn't have been for Donald Trump. 2 years ago, we might have already had World War III. You know? But now what's happening is this, Donald Trump is doing everything that he can do. He's put a man in, he's put one of his guys in the Federal Reserve. But the problem is you got one guy, the chief in the Federal Reserve, but you got all those other bunch who are all working for the new order, or whatever you want to call it, you know. Anyway, so what's happening here is we got a total mess. The whole system's getting ready to roll over, and I think Russia is sitting there poised on the border, ready to wait for our most vulnerable moment, because they want to reestablish the former greatness of the Soviet Union era. They want all those countries back, and maybe a few more. You know? They're going to wait until our most vulnerable spot to attack us. You know? And I'll tell you what, I believe that their big push and the big plum that they'd love to have is Germany. You got to think big, guys. You got to think big. I know what I just said, you probably think, hey, you know what, Glenn's out there. You know, they'll never attack Germany. Listen, the end of World War II, you know, NATO had tremendous amount of tanks, the Allied forces, you know, they had tremendous amount of tanks and conventional weaponry. But along came these nuclear weapons, short-range nuclear ballistic missiles and stuff like that. And they said, you know, we don't need all those we don't need so many tanks as we used to need. Because now we got these bright new shiny nuclear weapons. And heck, one nuclear weapon is as good as 1,000 tanks. So let's just take them and we'll put them in, we'll save one tank and we'll put it in front of the war memorial and we'll paint it every year with some green paint and we'll leave it sitting out there as a testament to World War II, you know. And all the others would just tear them to pieces and we'll sell them for the steel so we can make some new BMWs. Yeah, that's what they did, you know. And so they lowered the amount of tanks that they have, and the few that they have, they never really updated them very good, and they're lacking in conventional weapons. Russia, though, they've improved, and they've made better their conventional weapons, and they've added to them. Okay? So we're mostly reliant upon high-tech weaponry to cover what conventional weapons would cover. But, you know, all of a sudden your hands are tied. If Russia's got these new hypersonic weapons, right, that can blow up like 5 cities in a matter of a second, and you can't stop them, then your hands are tied. You can't use your thermonuclear weapons either to defend yourself. So then what are you going to use? Well, you're going to head back to your conventional weapons. All of a sudden, you're going to be in a panic. You're going to say, hey, you know what? We've only got 400 tanks now, and Russia's got 1,500. You know? How do we get so lacking? We're lacking in conventional weapons. Quick, build some new ones. But that's going to take 6 months or a year. And by that time, Russia will be marched on through Germany, for crying out loud. You know? I mean, they can roll those tanks through awful quick if they're not meeting any opposition. And how long do you really think, if the Russians really rolled in there with all these troops that they got, like, look, stationed on, and well-trained, crack troops, over 80,000 of them, and each one's trained, already trained to take on NATO. And they got thousands of tanks built up over there and everything else. How long do you think that's going to take them to push through Ukraine? And then they just got a little piece of Poland to push through, and they're right on the border of Germany. And Berlin's right there, just on the other side of the border. If they can take Berlin with conventional weapons, and our hands are tied. Here we are, we're sitting over here in the dark. Our infrastructure's all been cut. Our communication lines have all been cut by the Russians. They only got to go down and cut an undersea cable or two. That's all they got to do. Cables, I guess, are about this big around. They just cut one of those cables that carry our communications across the ocean. We won't even know what's going on in Europe. They could be taking all of Europe, and America wouldn't even know if they cut those cables. We'd be back to using a passenger pigeon again to try to find out what's going on over there. At least in the old days, they had communications that weren't so vulnerable to attack. We've also, our communication lines have been made vulnerable to attack. Back in World War II, you know, they used to take care with armies being able to communicate. They had different ways of doing it than we have today, but those ways were not so susceptible to attack. We've made ourselves vulnerable all the way around, even with our money over here. Now all we're using is these stupid debit cards. Everybody's got these stupid debit cards, for crying out loud. Do you know how vulnerable that makes us to attack? Because the internet goes down, we can't even buy food. At least back in World War II, we used to have coins and paper bills. And so if they attacked us and the power went out, we could still go to the supermarket and buy a bag of lettuce or something, you know, or a sandwich. Now we go to the supermarket and the power goes down. The supermarket, they can't even get the front doors open. They don't even have windows, for crying out loud, to let the light in. What in the hell are we thinking? It's stupidity in the worst form. We won't, if this system goes down, and the power goes out, we won't even be able to have toilet paper to wipe our butt. How in the heck can we fight against the Russians? The stupidity of these New World Order people, these globalists who want to make the world into this new rosy place they want to think that they're making it into, wherever sunshine's going to be everywhere. Sunshine's going to be coming out of people's backsides whenever they bend over. You know, and this new, it's all a bunch of baloney. Nothing's going according to plan. All they're doing is making us vulnerable to the Russians to attack. And Donald Trump's right. He said we got to get in there and improve the military. Yes, you got to improve the military. You got to improve the conventional forces of the military. Not the high-tech weapons, because Russia's got the high-tech weapons too, and their high-tech weapons basically cancel your high-tech weapons out. So why build more high-tech weapons when the conventional, if they keep it conventional, you have to keep it conventional. We're lacking in the conventional. We need to increase our conventional to create a deterrent. Instead, we're letting our conventional weapons suffer, and we're all about these new high-tech weapons. None of it makes any sense, guys. None of it makes any sense. But it's not looking good, you know. The Russians are preparing for something really big, and that's what I think it is. I think it is the system going down, the financial system going down, and weakening our ability to fight. I think that's what they're waiting for, and I think I know what they really want. They really want Ukraine. They want Ukraine, and I think once they push through Ukraine, they'll be so heady with exhilaration and like yippee yahoo, we've taken it so easy. 2 weeks and it's fell. Ukraine fell, and they'll be like dancing up and down in the streets. And then they'll think to themselves, well, you know, we lost almost no men. It was easy peasy. Why stop here? Let's march, boys, into Poland, into Romania, through Moldova, and just keep right on going into Europe. Because Europe's in tatters right now anyway. All there is left in Europe is police forces fighting against yellow vests, and nobody knows what's going on. Just a confused mess, and power's out in half of the cities, and they'll just march right on through, boys. Anyway, I'm not going to harp on this anymore. I just think that this is ridiculous, a ridiculous situation we've got ourselves into, and you can thank the globalists for it, because they're the guys that's been in charge up until Trump came in. And they left him a mess. He's trying to fix it, but it's too big a mess. And also, he's got all these Democrats fighting him at every turn. He can't get nothing done. They're like a bunch of, they're like you ever go on a date with somebody, you know, and you're going on a date, and she wants to bring her grandmother along, and her grandmother's in the back seat. That's what the Democrats are like. They're like the grandmother in the back seat, you know? Anyway, listen, thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you in the next show. Bye-bye, guys.